The oculomotor nerve is the third of the 12 cranial nerves, which help control eye movement. In this video, we'll show you a visual mnemonic for the oculomotor nerve so that you'll be ready on test day. We're on set to film a high-speed chase scene for the hottest new sci-fi thriller. Since the movie set is set in the future, this actor is wearing all the newest tech, including an Oculus 3D headset. This Oculus headset is our symbol for the oculomotor nerve. Get it? Oculus for oculomotor? As a bonus, check out the camera in the back there. It's been mounted onto one of those studio cars to keep up with the moving action of the chase scene. The camera on the motor car can also help you remember the oculomotor nerve. You know, a camera for ocular or related to the eyes, and a motor vehicle for motor, right? Now that we've anchored ourselves to the oculomotor nerve, let's move on to some of its important characteristics. Check out the logo on the studio car here. It looks like this movie is going to premiere in 3D. Let this 3D movie here remind you that the oculomotor nerve is also known as cranial nerve 3. You can also remember this using the fancy 3D Oculus headset. Get it? 3D for cranial nerve number 3? The oculomotor nerve is the third cranial nerve, or cranial nerve 3. Since many people just call cranial nerves by their number, you should know to associate cranial nerve 3 with the oculomotor nerve. With the name and numbering out of the way, let's move on to how this nerve functions. The cool movie hero needs a sweet ride to chase the bad guys. That's why the actor is riding an awesome futuristic motorcycle. By the way, this motorcycle is our symbol for motor nerves. Motorcycle for motor nerves. Get it? That should be pretty easy to remember. The oculomotor nerve is a motor nerve transmitting motor information from our brain to the muscles of our body to stimulate movement. We'll learn more about the specific muscles that this nerve innervates later on. It's worth noting that motor nerves are also called efferent nerves, which is just a fancy way of saying that it transmits signals away from or out of the brain. Since motor signals start in the brain and travel outwards to reach their target muscles, this should be pretty easy to understand. Next, as the movie actor takes off on his motorcycle, the cameraman quickly pivots the camera rig around to follow his movement. This moving camera rig is our symbol for eye movement. You know, since cameras capture visual information kind of like our eyes, right? So this rig responsible for moving the camera around should remind you that the oculomotor nerve plays a major role in eye movement. You see, the central or inner fibers of the oculomotor nerve innervate most of the extraocular muscles controlling the eye, including the superior, inferior, and medial rectus muscles, along with the inferior oblique muscle. Along with the oculomotor nerve, the trochlear and abducens nerves also innervate specific extraocular muscles. As a result, any damage to the oculomotor nerve leads to unopposed action by the trochlear and abducens nerves, manifesting as a down and out gaze. Got that? Let's move on. Oops, it looks like our cameraman forgot to take off his lens cover before beginning to film. He completely missed the first part of the chase scene. No wonder the actor looks so angry. Anyways, see how the cameraman is using his fingers to pry open his camera lens cover? This opening bifold lens cover kind of resembles an opening eyelid, don't you think? That's right, this opening lens is our symbol for eyelid opening or elevation of the eyelid. Again, it's the central or inner fibers of the oculomotor nerve that innervates the muscle that lifts our upper eyelid, formerly called the levator palpebrae. It should follow, then, that damage to the oculomotor nerve causes ptosis, a fancy term for eyelid drooping. Now that we've covered the functions of the central or inner fibers of the oculomotor nerve, let's move on to some functions of the peripheral or outer fibers. To make sure everything is getting captured, our cameraman is squinting one eye as he looks through his viewfinder. His squinting eye is our symbol for pupillary constriction, because he's kind of constricting his eye, just like how pupillary constriction describes the constriction of the pupil. The oculomotor nerve controls pupillary constriction by innervating the sphincter pupillae muscle. This helps reduce the amount of light entering the eye. Because of this function, the oculomotor nerve plays an important role in the pupillary light reflex. This reflex causes your pupils to constrict in response to light. This reflex happens when another sensory nerve, specifically the optic nerve, tells the brain that there is too much light entering the eye. In response, the oculomotor nerve signals to the eye muscles, causing constriction of the pupils. This role in the pupillary light reflex should be pretty easy to remember if you know that the oculomotor nerve works to constrict the pupils. Importantly, the oculomotor nerve differs from the optic nerve in the control of this reflex in more than one way. Let's talk about another key difference. Notice how the cameraman is only squinting one eye in the viewfinder. Of course, it'd be really silly to try looking into a viewfinder with both eyes, right? Squinting only one eye should help you remember that damage to the oculomotor nerve results in the loss of pupillary constriction to only one eye. The technical term for this is non-consensual reflex loss. In other words, if the oculomotor nerve is damaged, you'll lose the pupillary light reflex in only one eye. In contrast, damage to the optic nerve causes a loss of constriction in both eyes. Got that? Our cameraman is also busy adjusting his camera lens. This helps keep the movie hero in focus as he drives away. Focusing the camera lens is our symbol for accommodation, because accommodation allows our eyes to focus on objects, just like how this cameraman is adjusting his lens to focus on the moving scene. The oculomotor nerve also plays an important role in accommodation by innervating the ciliary muscles of the eye. These muscles adjust the eye lens to focus on objects up close. Naturally, this role in accommodation is an integral part of the accommodation reflex, which focuses vision at the center of your gaze. Like with the pupillary light reflex, this reflex begins when another sensory nerve, the optic nerve, transmits a signal for an unfocused image to the brain. In response, the brain sends back motor signals through the oculomotor nerve to produce lens adjustments that bring the image into focus. The actor isn't looking too good. It looks like the face-paced motorcycle chase and the 3D headset have definitely made him feel a little motion sickness. This motion-sick and nauseous actor should remind you of the vestibulo-ocular reflex. You know, since motion sickness occurs when this reflex isn't working properly. Let's unpack this concept to understand what I mean. The vestibulo-ocular reflex is responsible for stabilizing and aligning our gaze during head movements. The oculomotor nerve is a crucial component of this reflex, since it controls the eye movements needed to stabilize our gaze. To be more specific, in response to head movements detected by our vestibular system, the oculomotor nerve tells our eye muscles to generate compensatory eye movements to adjust and stabilize our vision. If there's damage to the oculomotor nerve, you end up with misalignment and an unstable picture. This leads to intense feelings of motion sickness. Alright, with the functions out of the way, we're going to move next to discuss the anatomical path the nerve takes on its journey from the brainstem to the muscles of the eye. Our movie hero is not pleased about needing to redo this take after getting motion sick. In fact, he's so angry about the cameraman that he can't help but throw up a middle finger at the cameraman. This middle finger is our recurring symbol for the midbrain. You know, middle finger for midbrain. The oculomotor nerve emerges from the midbrain of the brainstem. Specifically, this nerve originates from the oculomotor and Edinger-Westphal nuclei located near the superior colliculus of the midbrain. The nerve fibers exit the midbrain at the interpeduncular fossa, located between the optic chiasm and the pons. This is a ton of anatomical detail. For test day, you really just need to remember the midbrain. Let's turn back to the studio car logo here. It looks like this movie is called Super Orbit, a fitting title for an action sci-fi. Anyways, this Super Orbit sign is our recurring symbol for the superior orbital fissure, because super orbit sounds like superior orbital, right? From the midbrain, the oculomotor nerve exits our skull through a cranial foramen, or opening, located at the back of our eye socket. This opening in the skull is formally called the superior orbital fissure. The foramen is incredibly important to remember, as trauma to this area of the skull can lead to impaired function of all the nerves running through this opening. This actor was so dizzy, he veered right off set and crashed his motorcycle into a studio wall. Ouch. He crashed it right into a poster of another movie about Uncle Sam, fittingly named Uncle. It looks like this Uncle Sam poster has been completely crushed. Let this crushed, squeezed uncle poster remind you of uncle herniations. Because uncle sounds like uncle, and this squeezed Uncle Sam has been displaced from his original position. Kind of like how herniation refers to squeezing and displacement, right? Uncle herniations, also known as transtentorial herniations, can occur from elevated intracranial pressure. Since the skull is a closed space, this can cause parts of the brain to get squeezed through or herniate downwards towards the midbrain of the brainstem. Since we know that the oculomotor nerve exits at the midbrain, it should make sense that this nerve can get compressed by this type of herniation, damaging the nerve. In fact, uncle herniations classically lead to damage in the oculomotor nerves, which classically present as gaze paralysis in a down and out direction. Alright, that's it for the oculomotor nerve. Let's summarize what we've learned here. The oculomotor nerve, also known as cranial nerve number 3 or the third cranial nerve, is a motor nerve that transmits motor information from the brain to the muscles of the eye. Specifically, the oculomotor nerve mediates eye movements and eyelid elevation, as well as pupillary constriction and accommodation. As such, it is an important efferent component of the pupillary light reflex in one eye at a time, the accommodation reflex, and the vestibulo-ocular reflex. The oculomotor nerve originates from the midbrain and exits the skull at the supraorbital fissure. Finally, it's worth noting that the oculomotor nerve is often damaged in uncle herniations, which can compress the nerve near its origin at the midbrain. Okay, now we're actually done. I think it's time to take a break from filming. Our movie actor definitely needs it. I'll see you in the next one.